Well, I just ran a stand here. Nothing came in, just some birds and stuff, but that's typical when you're cold calling. You're going to have a lot of dry stands. This is the spot where I called my second confirmed cat, the first cat I had in the scope. It was about this time of day. I followed these tracks, like I said, crossed the road, and I followed them up here. I got to be within 100 yards. I didn't find the rock that I set up above, but I got to be within 100 yards of where I called this cat. You can see how thick it is. A lot of guys couldn't understand that I'd have a cat at 35 yards and not be able to take a shot, but you can see how thick this stuff is. It's subalpine scrub. Real slow growing, lots of roadies, lots of blowdown, just a tangled mess. Called him about 65 minutes. I called distress, I called bobcat distress, I called female calls, and then at about 65 minutes I switched to whistle, and he whistled right back. He whistled and gurgled, and he was, I figured, about 100 yards out, kind of up across the draw. And when I came in here today, I remembered why I stopped here. Believe it or not, this is open. This is got visibility compared to what I've been coming through. And so that's one of the reasons. But the other reason is I saw the ridge crowning going down and across, and then through the treetops I could see an extension of the mountain, another big ridge over there. And so I realized if I stopped here and I pointed the speaker that way, I would get the ridge I'm on, I'd get the draw, and I'd get the next ridge. So I've got probably 2 square miles of sound traveling out from here. So I stopped here, even though his tracks were still going straight on. They hadn't bedded, he hadn't started hunting. I went ahead and set up here, and 65 minutes, he was about 100 yards out. And I just kept the whistle going, and about 5 minutes later, he showed up, and he was down. He came in about this angle right here, and he was down about that angle, about 35 yards, and he stopped about 15 yards short of the call. My first mistake was that I set the call right in the middle of a game trail. I wanted it to broadcast, and I hadn't had enough knowledge gathered at the time to realize that I needed to hide the call. I set the call right in the open, right in the middle of a trail. And where he stopped was just a fluke that I didn't have a shot. I mean, I absolutely didn't have a shot. But he stopped because he saw the call. He saw the source of the sound. He knew that's what the sound was coming out of, and so he stopped, and he was just looking at it. And I could see his front toes coming out from behind a bigger tree, and I could see his nose coming out from behind a bigger tree, and he was moving his head around. He was looking, but he wouldn't move. And I looked at him through the scope for about 3 minutes, and I could tell by the sequences that were running on the call that I'd been sitting there looking through the scope about 3 minutes, and I could see his whiskers, I could see the color change on his chin, I could see his toes, but he wouldn't move. And I move my head to the side, because sometimes if you move your head to the side, like, trees will open up a little gap and you can maybe find a place to thread a bullet through. I didn't see anything like that, but my head caught on a branch, and it pulled the branch over, and then it let it go, and it wiggled. And he caught that movement, and I saw him step back and look up the hill, and I could see, I was looking through the scope, and I could see one eye, and he saw me. I knew he recognized what I was, and he whirled, and I saw the flash of his back, and he just slithered through this stuff, just like a snake almost, totally silent, and disappeared. That movement was my second mistake, not the fact that unfortunately I caught a branch on my head and wiggled it, but I should have just waited. I've heard so many different stories now where if you don't bust them, he was not nervous, he was not worried, he didn't know what was going on. And if you don't bust them, they'll just hang around. They're not impatient, they're not, like a coyote will charge in, see the call, whirl, and charge out. They don't do that. They will hang around, they'll loiter around. And if I'd have just waited and just, it was hard to wait. This is the second cat I called. He was right there, And I was so nervous. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything going on around me hardly. It was tough, but I should have waited, because he would have probably started to move around. He would have probably circled the call. I probably would have got a shot. But I figured I had to do something. I was used to coyote hunting. I had to do something. I had to make the shot. He's been standing too long. It was a mistake. I should have just waited, but I didn't. He saw me, he whirled, and he left. And that was that. But I'll always remember this spot. That was the first time I ever watched one through the scope, and just a fantastic experience. I hate getting here. It's horrible, horrible walking, but it's just a really neat memory.